raise that bar.
That extra gear, that first 3 steps.
Huge strides in the performance.
That I might not be the player I am today.
All right, welcome to another episode of Behind the Gear. And today we have the lucky privilege of sitting down with Jason Brooks. And Brooksy, being from small town in Listowel, Ontario, I know you've got a tremendous background in hockey, obviously, as playing and then playing at a high level and then going on to coach and stuff. But what's it like growing up in Listowel, Ontario?
Well, first off, thank you for having me on your show, on this podcast. It's an honor to be here. Secondly, growing up in Listowel was an amazing experience. We are, I think, born in Listowel to play hockey. And that's from the youngest of age I can remember is, putting on the skates, going to the old Listowel Memorial Arena and playing and honing our skills to the best of our abilities. And I was very fortunate. I grew up playing with some great players. We had some great minor hockey teams. Played on an all-Ontario team with a Bantam team. It was great to experience that. We, in my own age group, we made it to the finals a couple of times in the all-Ontario, just never got over that hump. So when I was able to play up and play, I was a Peewee playing Bantam, and we ended up winning. And it was great because it was really that first taste of, big success, right? Winning an all-Ontario and doing that with a group of guys that you love and you want to succeed with.
Oh, for sure, man. Yeah, and I mean, I'm from Sudbury, so similar idea, small town, a lot of outdoor hockey, a lot of outdoor rink hockey, things like that, right? And you kind of have that community of guys that you kind of grow up with, that core group of 5, 6, 7, 8, people that you're probably playing multiple sports with and stuff like that. Even winning in Bantam, like I'm assuming even in a small town like that kind of gets behind you, right? Like you think Bantam hockey in Toronto is like whatever, but in small towns like that, kind of the community gets around you a little bit, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, whether we won or whether we just were participating in those all-Ontarios, the fans here, always got behind it. The community always got behind it. It was a packed barn. The atmosphere was phenomenal. It was a little bit of foreshadowing, Glazer, when you start looking at what we did with the Junior B team here, playing in the, I guess the GOJHL finals and then moving on to Sutherland Cup playoffs. To see the facilities packed, right? And we got that taste as players playing in all-Ontario. So it was pretty surreal.
Oh, man. And for you being from Listowel, and we'll kind of jumping ahead here, and we'll get into this in a little bit later, dive into it. But for you being from Listowel and then now coaching the team and turning the team around, because I know when you took the team over, they weren't great. No knock on any other coaches or any other players, but they weren't great. And then you kind of took it over and brought your culture and kind of what you bring to the table as a coach. And let's be honest, like anybody who says that a coach, and not a lot of people say this, but like coaches make such a big difference in hockey and with a team and changing culture. And you managed to do that and going back to, coaching your hometown and having success and winning is unbelievable, man. What was it like the last couple of years when you guys were on your runs and was it packed houses and just jammed and people coming up to you at Tim Hortons saying, "Hey coach, good job," and stuff?
Honestly, yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was pretty exciting. I mean, the first go around, we won the Cherry Cup, beat Elmira in 6 games. That was huge. That was like winning the Stanley Cup for us.
That's awesome.
And I say that because, looking at the Sutherland Cup playoffs, in our minds, Caledonia was a power out of the Golden Horseshoe. London was the power coming out of the West. Realistically, we didn't know where we stood because we'd never been there. Those teams are constantly in the Sutherland Cup playoffs. So we just, I think, took it for granted and just kind of said, "Oh, we're here. It is what it is. We won our Cherry Cup. That's fantastic." Then we go in the next year with the attitude after losing to London. Seeing Elmira beat Caledonia and then beat London in the finals, we're kind of like, well, geez, we could have won this thing. And the players had a huge, I guess, revelation is the best way to say it. Like they came in the next year saying, "We're winning this thing." Like it's a bust year if we don't win it all. So to get back to your question about the fans and everything else, we won that first year in the old arena. like we were still in the old barn, so it didn't seat that many. You cram people in, and it was always packed. When we won the Sutherland Cup in 18, that arena was sold out, and I'll say 1,500 people is sellout, and I'd be hazard to say that they exceeded that in space. But it was phenomenal. Like, it was so cool to win on home ice, to celebrate in front of all your fans that experience the journey with you. It was awesome, and to win with so many local players too was fantastic.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. That's so cool. It's funny you say though, that kind of mental block, right? When you guys won the Cherry Cup the first year, I'm sure for the boys, that, like you said, that was kind of your Stanley Cup, and then but hey guys, we got to still play in the finals here. Like, we got another, but it's kind of and we're done. We kind of achieved our goal, and then because there is some sort of a mental block sometimes with players, right? As far as that kind of stuff, and you probably saw it firsthand looking back on it now. And then the next year, obviously, you probably had a good core group of those guys back, added some pieces, and then they're like, no man, we're winning or we're busting, and it's really cool that that obviously everything lined up for you guys, had a good season, and then ended up pulling it off in the end, which is unreal, especially for a small town. I remember being in Sudbury, like going to Wolves games when they were good, and that this is scarce years when they were really solid, but it'd be maybe a 4,000 or 5,000 seat arena max, maybe 3, and they'd be 3 deep standing. Like, definitely not to code with the fire department, but it was unreal, man. It was such a cool environment, and it was awesome. So I can't imagine.
It's phenomenal standing on the bench and looking around and having that many people there, and having that many people cheering for you, for one. And then when you're celebrating and the final buzzer sounds and these people are erupting, it's just an amazing experience. Like, you're just so caught up in the wave and the emotion and everything else. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's cool, man. I got to stop talking about this. I'm getting chills right now. This is wicked. Now, did you ever have any thoughts when you're on the bench sitting there being like, now, you're 35, 40, kind of in that age, and you're like, man, I used to be like 7 years old playing in this town or in this rink even. And, man, I'm here coaching and we might actually pull this off and win it. Like, do you ever have any thoughts like that of kind of almost going through a quick little, even before the game or whatever, but just holy full circle?
Yes. Yeah, I did. I used to watch the Cyclones when I was that age, when I was young, and I idolized those guys. It didn't matter to me if they were a good team or not. Like, those were junior hockey players in my mind. And that was, we're close to Kitchener, so you have the Rangers, you had Owen Sound up Highway 6. You could have said, well, those were your OHL destinations. We went to Peterborough when we were younger to a tournament. We thought the Petes were everything. Yeah. But you didn't see them regularly. You saw the Bees play every Friday night at home. That was your team. And just to win, like, against Elmira that first year, and to think back, as you say, at those experiences as the little guy, right? And it was pretty awesome. And with that, I mean, looking at it from that perspective, when I came home and said I was going to coach the Bees, I wanted the program to be a spot where Listowel kids wanted to play. That I wanted to be a Cyclone again. Being a Cyclone was important for us as kids. I wanted it to be important for the younger kids coming up again to say, yeah, you know what? I want to be a Listowel Cyclone. And to win and have success just expedited that, for I think, tenfold, right?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's, and I'm sure there are, young kids like you were now watching you guys play, this year's a bit different, but last year, and saying, man, I want to be on that team one day. I'm going to play for, and shooting pucks in their driveway. And, when you've got a group of boys like that, and, you're looking at players from 16 to 20, how much emphasis do you put on that community, meaning, boys, you are representing something bigger than yourselves here. You know what I mean? And I think it's important for kids in minor hockey to get taught that at a young age. And as well as I do, a lot of them don't. And they take things for granted, and they come and play for Guelph or for Niagara or for Listowel, and they just take it for granted. How much did you instill that in your team, where we have pride? We're this year, this 6 months, you're from Listowel. Like, you take pride in being, a Cyclone. You take pride. Like, how much do you push on your players on that?
We pushed a lot. But again, fortunately for us, we had such a good core group of Listowel players, hometown players. that I think drives that community, because that's what they've been born and raised to know. When we started the conversation, when we talked about being from Listowel and what is Listowel, what's hockey, right? And that's what these kids knew, and they knew the Cyclones because that's what they wanted to do. And to put it on the map, put the Listowel Cyclones back on the hockey map was important for them. But to do that, they had to do it through the community and get their support and get their trust and be in the schools. Go talk to kids about their journey and their experiences. And, they would do cook hot dogs, right? Like they do it as a little fundraiser, but they had so much fun with it. They cook hot dogs and, people come up and talk to them and get to know them. The kids in the high school, like it wasn't about you're a junior B and you're all that, a bag of chips. You're just like any other kid. You have an honor, a privilege to play for the Bees, but look at it that way. Be humble enough to know it's just a game, right? And I want you to be involved in the high school. I want you to be involved with other kids that don't play hockey. I want you to just, again, immerse yourself in the community and seeing where kids are now today after that experience. Like kids have moved to Listowel that have played and have stayed in the community because it was such a big part of their career here. Yeah, that's what makes it special for me.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. Yeah, no, definitely. Now, you didn't obviously just like become a coach because you liked hockey and you're good at it. This started way back, obviously. So you had the opportunity to play for the Bees at one point, for the Cyclones when you were coming up. And then from there went on to the OHL. Now, what was that jump like for you going from minor hockey to junior B? Like, did you find that a huge jump, or was it a bigger jump going from B to the O?
Going back to thinking playing, I would say both were big jumps.
Yeah.
When I went into B, I was coming out of Bantam hockey because we didn't have AAA, so I was coming to Listowel Bantam hockey. Played at 15 here, and it was an experience. It was a jump for sure. It was like playing with 20-year-old men.
Yeah.
I remember getting into my first fight. It was the home opener, and I fought a 20-year-old. And here's the funny story about that: the 20-year-old I fought is the father of one of my players that I'm currently coaching. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, get into my first fight and he rips off my helmet and hits me over the head with my helmet.
Nice. Old school tactics.
Old school. Yeah. Old school. Not going to lose to the young guys, but, it was definitely a jump, but it was a great learning curve. And then the next year I obviously came back, and because I knew what to experience, and it was, I had a much better year, obviously. Going to the OHL is a far different animal, I found, because you're going now on the ice with guys that are drafted in the NHL, guys like Mike Pekka, right? Guys that were first round NHL picks. Like I've watched you on TV,
right?
And I'm from small town Ontario, and I'm looking at a guy I watched on the Global Game of the Week that I grew up watching every Saturday. Yeah. Now I was a little off. I was in a little bit of awestruck, and that first year in Ottawa, I needed to grow up pretty quick. So I would say that jump was different.
No, you bring up a good point, because a lot of times, you talk to young kids that are going through that path of, getting through minor hockey, then going to junior, then wanting to play in the O, and try to tell them like that's a big jump, and a lot of times kids are like, I'm good. I got drafted in the first round, second round, whatever that is, but it's still a big jump. And to your point, guys, you're playing against first rounders that are on the cusp of making the NHL. Not all of them, but some of them, right? But being around a guy, let's say like a Mike Pekka, because I know I believe he was played there in Ottawa, but what, like guys like that, what did you learn from guys like that as far as starting to become probably a small pro or even taking the game a little bit differently? But what were those guys like to be around?
Just their consistency day to day at the rink. Whether it was a practice or a game, just everything they did was so professional. To your point, like from stretching to riding the bike after a practice to riding the bike after a game. Like it wasn't like kids in minor hockey. We finish a game or even junior B, jump in the shower, get out of there, head to the bar as quickly as
yeah, totally.
Right? Get your post game meal, right? Then water. But these guys were so dedicated to getting better and putting the extra time in. Practice would end, they would still be on the ice working on some facet of their game. So you sit and watch that, and you just appreciate what they were doing to take their game to the next level. And we would try to do that, I think, as kids, but you quickly realize the elite are the elite, and they're the elite for a reason, right? And you can work as hard as you wanted to get better, which we did, but guys like Mike Pekka were special.
Yeah.
Right. And he made it because of how special he was as a player, as a person, as a leader.
Now, let me ask you this. So looking at a guy like Pekka and you being a coach now and seeing it, Mike Pekka was obviously, you're right, he was special. He was a great player and had a real good career, obviously, and a good leader. And from what, I don't know him at all, but just from what I've seen and just how he was on teams and stuff. But when you look at it now as even a father and a coach and stuff, does Mike Pekka kind of hone his game at the OHL level, then gets a chance? Or is this something that starts when he's like 5 years old, 6 years old, just even by the lessons he's learned or the people he's around, maybe his parents, I don't know, skills, coaches, whatever that is. But, is that something looking at it now kind of with a bigger lens, because we can look at it now because we're older, we've gone through it. And when I see kids like that, and especially, kids that Drew Doughty, who you're very familiar with, or other players, you look at them, you're like, they're special. There's no doubt about it. But when did that start for some of these kids? Meaning, when were they learning these good lessons of working hard or working on their skills or shooting pucks at home, things like that, you know what I mean? So a guy like Pekka, is that something that did start when he was 7, 8, 9 years old, you know what I mean? Or is it something that he learned later?
No, I definitely think it would have started when he was younger. Yeah. I mean, I think that work ethic, let me go back into this. Mike Pekka would be a natural athlete. He's just a natural athlete, but he would have been working on some of those skill development pieces at such an early age. The intangible for Mike Pekka that sets him apart, though, that I'm not so sure you work on, and you're the skills guy, so you're going to tell me maybe differently. But as a coach, I always find the hockey sense piece is something at a young age that they have or they don't. And I find that area of the game very hard as a coach to get players to buy into or to develop. You can develop skating because you can do plenty of drills on skating. You can develop passing or shooting, right? It's that hockey sense piece that if you've got that sense of the game, when to make a pass, when to draw a guy in, right? It's that feel. That's the part for a guy like Mike Pekka. That's why I say there's good players across the board, but then there's the great ones. And I think he would have been having that piece at such a young age that just helped him develop his game all the way through.
Totally agree, man. And I'm going to ask you this question. It's a bit of a loaded question. There's no real right answer to it, but what do you think about hockey IQ? Because I know right now, I guarantee in the last 3 years, you've had sick teams, you guys have won, and you're still going to the locker room after the game being like, man, that one Johnny whoever just doesn't get it, man. He's always in the wrong spot. He can't get open. He can't find ice, But do you think that you can teach hockey IQ? Like, do you think that that's something like a skating skill? I understand what you're saying because I think you're right. Like skating, you can go out and skate on the pond. You can go skate. You can get a skills coach, whatever you want to do. Shooting, same thing. But hockey IQ is a tough one. So have you come across any good ways of helping kids get better at understanding the game, or even just? And I understand like a meat and potatoes kid is not going to become a Mike Pekka or a Sidney Crosby on their mind, right? But can they get better a little bit? And have you found any ways? Have you broken the code a little bit on this and finding ways and helping players with that? It's part of the game.
Trying to do small area games more has been my thing. And again, that's learning from other coaches. That's not me because again, being old school, like I just said, I believe you got hockey sense or you don't.
Yeah.
But I think you can try with small area games, getting players to read different situations. We like to joke here, Laser and Listowel, is about giving the answers to the test. So small area game, right? We're going to give you all the answers. Look, this guy's going to be here. This guy's going to be here. You try to give him routes. You try to give him options. Well, how you read that, though, is ultimately on you, the player, right? Yeah. So we'll try to give him those answers, give him situations, whether it's 3-on-2 situations in a small area game or full ice, even 3-on-2 drill. And trying to give them those reads or 2-on-1 or 1-on-2, right? Like whatever the scenario,
totally.
You try to give them all those answers. But at the end of the day, I cannot make the play for you. You have to open your eyes, you have to see it, and then be able to execute it. and as you get older, at a much faster pace, right?
Yeah.
And make those decisions that much quicker. So I guess to answer the question, you try and try,
Yeah.
and hope that they can just pick up a little bit to help them. And no, I don't expect to make Mike Pekkas out of it, but just try to help them see the game a little bit better.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And this is something that's come up a ton in conversation as far as hockey IQ, can you develop it? And I agree with you. I think small area games is great. And sometimes adding that unpredictability a little bit to the players, because it is in a confined space, like you're going to find in a 5-on-5 game, let's say, which makes them kind of adapt and read. But you're right, some of them don't know the routes or can't figure out how to get open or find space. One thing that I've kind of went back and forth on a lot of people is, you know, at young ages, and I'm more selfishly diving into this because I've got young kids now, and how do I help them develop better soccer sense or basketball sense or hockey sense? But is watching games with kids, you know, and just like you did, like you went to a lot of junior games, you went to a lot of junior B games, and I'm sure your dad was part of it. Your dad was, you know what I mean, that he talked to you, or your uncle did, or your, you know, whatever, right? But instead of watching the goals and the hits and the plays, watching how things develop, you know, and being able to back a game up a bit. Let's say you're watching on TV and being saying, hey, see that goal? That was a sick goal, but watch how this player made that D-to-D pass and chipped it off the wall in the air, like whatever, right? And having players understand what's going on the ice, because I think sometimes now, I mean, you've heard this, I'm sure, before, but everything for the kids now is everything's in a 15-second highlight reel. No one's really, how many kids are watching a whole 3-period hockey game in the NHL? Not a lot right now, especially right now, but you know what I mean? So like getting them to watch games and see what players are doing and zone in on a player they like, or, you know, and reading plays more than just watching the highlights, I think is one thing that we've had a little bit of success with some players on. Just, and again, we're not going to turn them into to completely high IQ players, but just getting them to understand plays a little bit better. And because you and I watch a play sometimes, you're like, okay, this should happen. These guys crisscrossed here, that should be a chip. And then the player that doesn't get it hangs onto the puck, goes offside. Like,
right.
You know, so it's getting them to understand what those plays are. And that's one thing that I've kind of come across that's kind of helped a little bit as far as, and I'm sure you guys do a lot of video with the guys, right?
Yeah, well, we do a lot of video. We will talk about video later, because I'm probably the anti to the way video should be done. What I would say to your point is, I think it's bang on the money. So I've got 3 kids.
Yep.
A 14-year-old daughter, an 11-year-old daughter, and a 9-year-old son. During my OHL days, obviously they were very young; they weren't around as much. But when I get into the coaching in Listowel in the junior B, like my son, who's 9 now, was 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 7 in that area, right? When I'm coaching, he's in the room, like he's listening to meetings, he's watching us do video sessions. He learned at such a young age what you just talked about, right? And we'd be watching an NHL game, and he could make a comment and say, well, that player there should have done this. And then the, announcer says, well, that player should have done this 5 seconds later. And, my wife, Jessica, would look at him and be like, what? Right. And it's what they absorb.
Yeah.
It's what they absorb. And I think your point is bang on. Like, whether it's video games now, or whether it's watching YouTube clips or whatever it is, we were forced to watch a hockey game to watch a hockey game. There was no alternative. You watched CBC, you watched it, Saturday nights, and that was your hockey, right?
Yeah.
So to learn it, to understand it, to see those situations for sure, I think is great value. Watching videos, to tell you the truth, like when I worked in Guelph with Dave Barr, who coached in the NHL the last 13 years, Dave was a great mentor, great friend. We were funny. We were 10 negatives to 1 positive.
Yeah.
We always said the 1 positive would swell their heads, and we're going to give you 10 negatives, bring you back to reality. But the video doesn't lie, right? And it shows them to see yourself here. What were your options, right? And you've been in this a long time as a skills guy. The argument between teaching systems and teaching skills. I look at a system as a coach and say, I'm not hampering you to say it's like robots. You got to do this. Like a breakout isn't, to me, a robotic system. It's giving options for the player. What you do with the read is the skill.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
which guy's open, which guy's not open, what area should I put this puck, how hard should I put this puck, right? But I want to give a player breaking it, I want to give, say, a defenseman 3 or 4 options where he can move that puck. And then after he moves the puck, what is your next job? To be an option again. That to me is the skill part of the game within a system, right?
Yeah. No, totally. And I think, like, to your point, one thing, there's a gentleman who has a kid who's actually got drafted high to the NHL, and he played in the NHL for years. And we were talking about this stuff, and he said, and this makes a lot of sense, or made a lot of sense to me. And even with you, with the 9-year-old, I've got an 8-year-old boy who's kind of taken to the game and likes it, which is great. But he said the better their skills are at young ages. So if they can skate and they can handle a puck a little bit, and even shooting doesn't matter, but if they can skate and handle a puck with their head up, they're going to absorb the game much better than that kid that's struggling and kind of battling with the skating and can't really handle pucks with his heads down all the time, because they can see things. They can see players coming at them. They can, and I started thinking about it. I'm like, it makes total sense. Like, the better kids are at young ages, as far as just being able to shoulder check, look over their shoulder, kind of have that on ice awareness, whether they have the puck or not, the better they're going to be as far as taking things in. Whereas if I'm out there, just, I'm a young kid and I'm battling just to stay on my feet, there's no way I'm going to understand the game, So that was an interesting thing for me, selfishly, having young kids coming up and working with young kids. I'm like, yeah, like, get their skills good at young ages. And then, like you said, with systems, when I look at systems now, if I'm working with an NHL team or an AHL team, like, I get the systems, I know what they're doing, but if that guy can't pick up a wall pass or a backhand pass, then they can't break out properly. So I'll go in and work on that stuff and to help make that system better. You know what I mean? So they can make that player, get their routes better or whatever, right? So I think it's important for players, like, bottom line, just understand the game of hockey, right? And learn the game of hockey. And then it'll become a little bit easier.
1,000%, I agree.
Yeah. Now, going from the OHL, like, so you ended up, having a good career in the OHL, and at what point in the because this is the thing, right? When you go to the OHL and you start playing, obviously everyone that plays in the OHL is, okay, I want to get to the NHL. That's kind of that's the next step, right? And then at what point for you was it kind of like, okay, maybe the NHL or pro hockey may not work out, or maybe, for you just made a decision that I'm going to go a different route. But like, at what age did that kind of come clear to you, where you're like, you know what, maybe I'm going to pursue something a little bit different here?
Okay, so when my first year in the OHL, I was playing in Ottawa, whatever, rookie year, needing to learn, whatever. Next year, I went back to Ottawa. Right at the end of training camp, I got traded to London. So I got to come home, closer to home anyway, playing in a different organization. Started to actually feel pretty good about my game, and really was enjoying my time in London. Was off to a great start. Subsequently broke my ankle. I first hurt my knee pretty bad. Had a knee-on-knee check and injured my PCL ligament. Yeah. So I was off a good chunk of change with that. Came back from it, and within 3 games had broken my ankle severely. Had a collision with Todd Bertuzzi. Had surgery on it. Ended up sitting out till January. Returned in January, so I think it was about 6 weeks. Came back and started playing. Played into the playoffs. And then got ranked in the draft that year. Didn't get drafted. Yeah. And so not getting drafted was a big tough pill to swallow. Now, I hadn't played enough games. I get that and what have you, but it was a tough pill to swallow. So I thought, I got to make this up. So I got the screws taken out of my ankle, ripped my groin during the training camp the following year, to the point where I ripped it right off the bone. Tried to play with it, and I got pulled off the ice in like November, and then basically sat out the rest of the year. And so, your season is done. You're struggling with what to do next. Had surgery in April on my groin, and at that point decided I would go to university. But I was recovering from the surgery, so I ended up playing Junior B one last year, and then went to the University of Waterloo to play for Don McKee the following season. I played a year and a half at Waterloo, and ultimately suffered a career ender, post-concussion syndrome. So massive concussion that I was out 3 years with, and had to hang up my skates, kind of forced to hang up my skates at that point. So So to answer that question, I guess it started pretty early. I just didn't really want to admit it, and ended up finishing off in university.
But man, like, and I know you're a good player, and I know injuries, like, that's the one thing that's so tough, right? When, if it's your own decision, it's your decision, right? But when it's kind of taken from you a little bit as far as injuries and just, I mean, that's a run of bad luck right there, where you got, 3 or 4 major, you're missing months. You're not, missing a game or two. You're missing months of the season, which makes it tough. What was it like kind of going through? Because I know concussions is something that's obviously a hot topic. It's brought up a lot. And I've had a couple of, ex-NHLers on here and stuff that went through some, some tough times, man, after going through concussions and then trying to recover from it. And when they nag and they lag like that, it's so hard, man, because you feel good one day and then the next day you don't, and then you feel good for a week and the next week you don't. So was it a long journey like that for you, as far as just ups and downs kind of all over the place?
Yeah, I had to withdraw from university. I couldn't read. Would make me nauseous. The headaches were awful. I had personality issues. Like I started getting angrier and angrier. I went into a real dark period.
Yeah.
Real dark period. Kind of hard to explain. Like I'm sure you've heard it though through these other guys, but I think everybody's experiences are similar but different.
Yeah.
It was really just a tough pill to swallow, and it was really just a dark period because I didn't know how to get out of it. Again, school, I was fighting through school because I had a hard time concentrating. Just like I said, personality, hanging out with my friends. I wasn't very good at that anymore because I struggled with sleep and not sleep. So at times they wanted to go out, I'd be asleep. I wanted to try to exercise to get back in shape. Well, there was none of that because as soon as my heart rate went up, I'd be sick. So yeah, it was a long journey. Those 3 years.
Yeah, and it's so hard when you're a young, athletic, guy, girl, doesn't matter, and then all of a sudden, even that gets taken away from you, right? Like, you're probably not loving how you look, you're not loving how you feel, you know what I mean? And then it's a constant battle for sure. Now, how did you get out of it? And I guess during that time, did you talk a lot about it? Like, were you pretty open about it and talking about it, or were you just kind of trying to internalize it and trying to figure it out on your own?
It's a good, very valid question. I don't know if I talked about it or not. I just sort of lived it and lived it miserably. And as I say, I wasn't a very good friend because I think I lived it miserably on them as well. I got out of it. I got very fortunate. So I went to a neurosurgeon in Mississauga. I had been getting tests done and saw doctors in Toronto, Dr. Mark Lindsay, who was an Olympic doctor at the time for the U.S. Olympic team, the Canadian Olympic team. My apologies. He set me up with a doctor in Colorado Springs, who was from the U.S. Olympic team, who he had worked with. So I went to Colorado Springs for a weekend to see him. Anyway, long story, but at the end of the day, through Mark and this doctor in Mississauga, they ended up diagnosing me. I had a fractured skull. Our good friend Joe Birch hit me in a game, and I hit the base of my skull on the lip of the board.
Oh, okay.
So where the glass and the boards meet. And it actually had fractured it. It fractured my skull. But in the x-rays, because it's such a minute fracture, like nobody saw it. But a nerve had healed inside the fracture. And so it was giving me the symptoms of the concussion.
No way.
So I had the doctor, this neurosurgeon, actually gave me a like a neurectomy, they cut the nerve, and all of a sudden my headaches were gone.
Wow.
All of a sudden that pain was gone. All of a sudden I was kind of getting back to normal. Now, at the time, I was on medications that were pretty strong and had to go through that next battle of getting off the meds. But it was such a relief to be pain-free, so to speak, in my head, to be able to kind of get back to a bit of normalcy, right? So that was huge.
Oh man, I can't imagine. It's obviously unfortunate no one caught that, right? And like you said, it's pretty small, but having that kind of lingering for that long, that might have been able to be, fixable, at an earlier point, it's probably a little bit frustrating, but a little bit relieved to get it done and kind of be able to move on.
I never ever looked back, and I may have at the time looked back and said, why wasn't this caught? But at the same time, I kind of look at it now and just say, well, I'm just grateful they did find it, because it was one chapter that's gone now, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, no, for sure. And then, so kind of going through all that, obviously, what got you into coaching at that point? So you're kind of, you're young at that point, probably under 25, right?
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
So
man.
I withdrew from school, from Waterloo. So I was at home. My father was just starting a new business, so I started helping him there, just at the time to offset being at school. And the Listowel Junior Bs came and asked me if I would have an interest in coaching. So I assumed it was for an assistant position. They had talked about a former coach of mine in minor hockey who was going to be, who I thought the head coach, and I'd be his assistant. So I said, yeah, I'm interested in something like that. The next meeting we had, they wanted me to coach. So they fired their coach mid-season. I took over at that time and finished the year with the Cyclones. End of that season, we talked a little bit more about coming back, but I was going to try to go back to university. In the end, I ended up going back to university and working with Dave Cressman, who was the University of Waterloo head coach at the time. Yeah. And he went on kind of as his student assistant to keep me in the game, which was a great experience. And that's kind of how I started. When I graduated that same year, I had the occipital neurectomy. See, I knew I'd come up with the name of that.
There you go. Yeah, nice.
Yeah. Anyway, the Guelph Storm phoned and said they were looking for a young assistant. They had a young assistant named Regan Stocko, who had been in the second assistant position, but I think was going to go back to work at the fire department and had got hired full-time at the fire department. So he was leaving, and this spot opened up, and thought, did I have an interest in maybe doing something like that? And to have an opportunity to be back in the OHL, to have an opportunity to work with Jeff Jackson, who was formerly head coach of Lake Superior State at the time. He had coached the U.S. National Development Program. I thought this would be a pretty cool opportunity. At no point did I ever think I'd do coaching as long as I did.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was a pretty great opportunity. And that's really how I got into it. That's
so cool, man. Yeah. And obviously you were with Guelph for quite a while and coached, kind of played some different roles there with Guelph. But, when you're coming out of, because I had helped out with Western a little bit. I was on the bench with them with Clark Singer. And for me coming out of playing and stuff, I ended up getting into coaching kind of quick, and then realize how different coaching is when you're actually coaching than what you thought it was when you're playing. You know what I mean? Like as a player, you're dogging the coaches, or it's not that hard. And then when you start actually coaching, like, whoa. So for you to get thrown in the fire as a head coach, because assistant coach is a little bit easier because you're not taking a lot of the fire. You're and you can be a good guy, and you can kind of play both sides of it a little bit. But as a head coach getting thrown in at a young age, like you basically learn just by getting thrown right in the fire to start it off, I'm sure.
In Guelph at the time, I think the toughest part for me was, I'd worked with Dave as the head coach before me, and he had done such a great job, right? And he's such a professional. The challenge for Jason Brooks was there was no NHL after my name.
Right.
Right. So I'm having to prove myself over and over and over again to, the owners, to the fans, to the players, and to myself. And I think that became the difficult part for me. I was doing both jobs. I ended up taking on the GM role at the time as well, which obviously makes it tougher.
Yeah,
right? You're doing coach and GM, but it's an experience that never changed. I mean, I learned so much. I'd learned so much from those great coaches before, whether it was Jeff Jackson, as I mentioned, Sean Camp, who's at the University of Guelph now, and then Dave Barr before becoming the head coach. It was a great experience. I wish it would have lasted longer. I think I did a pretty good job. I know we didn't win a championship. I know I didn't get into a playoff round, win a playoff round, but we were always over 500. We were always a competitive team. We had good kids, right? And I'm proud of the fact we had good people. Like those kids were good people. I tried to help them as best I could. Uh, could I have done things differently? Definitely. But you have to learn somewhere, right? And sometimes you got to learn through the down times. And getting fired was a real tough pill, right? Like you fail when you get fired. So that was hard. But I had worked with Marty Williamson. He was the head coach now in Niagara, and Marty and I had worked under 17 together for Team Ontario. And he said his assistant coach was leaving for the pro ranks, and would I have an interest in coming working with him in Niagara? It ended up being a perfect fit, right? So I go down there next and work with Marty as kind of his assistant coach, and the Burke family, who are wonderful, and share my stuff that I did involve with Marty. He's got his stuff from Niagara and when he was in Barrie, and we kind of melted it together and came up with a pretty good recipe for success, so to speak. And Marty's a great coach. I mean, all the man does is win wherever he goes. Yeah. And it was a great experience. So then, you put that together, and then I come back to Listowel, and now I'm not worried about getting fired as much, because I'm kind of like, this is for fun.
Yeah.
But I've had all these great teachers, and I've got all these great lessons, and I get to put it together now in my own program and put it into practice to see how it works.
Oh, it's cool, man. And the one thing I love about your journey through coaching is constantly learning, right? And that's the biggest thing, I think, with a player and a coach, anybody who's any kind of professional, is constantly learning and not say borrow, steal, whatever you want to call it, but like learning things from other people, grabbing some of the, I'm sure you use stuff that you've learned from all those guys, right? And just using it in what you do now. And, and looking back on it too. And I've done this many times where I look back and I'm like, man, I was not that good then. Like, I was not that good at even how I taught 5 years ago, or how I coached 5 years ago, to what I am, today, and kind of continuing to evolve with the times and with what's going on,
I think it's bang on. I think, that's one of the biggest areas that I miss, though, being a part of the OHL, was the constant camaraderie to learn, the constant ability to learn from others. So, coaching as the head coach, so you're going against Dale Hunter, right? And you're going against those London Knights teams. Like, he's one of the best, if not the best, right, in the junior ranks today. And you're preparing for him in golf 6 times.
Yeah.
Like, it forces you to have to get better if you want to, survive. Working against, Pete DeBoer and Kitchener, right? Like, your arch rival with the Gulf Storm. Like, I mean, this guy's now in the NHL for how many years? Stanley Cup finalist, how many times, right? Like, he does a great job, and it forces you to learn. And that's the one thing here. Like, I reach out to my friends. I reach out to Dave all the time. I reach out to Jeff all the time. I reach out to Dave Smith, head coach at RPI. Talk to them about different ideas. But again, when you're in it all the time at that level, that's all you do, is try to get better, try to pick up the next thing. We used to meet with NHL coaches. One of my favorite experiences was going to Detroit and talking to Mike Babcock, right? He would talk to us about different things, or being a part of Hockey Canada with the under-17 programs, and going out to Calgary and sit through the program of excellence programs and hear these guys talk, right? Like the Ken Hitchcock, the Pat Quinn, like, hear these guys talk and share their passion and share their knowledge. Like, I ate that stuff up, because I did. I wanted to learn, whether it was just one thing, one little thing, I felt like it was going to make me better,
Yeah. No, and I think that's the one thing I think that is lacking in minor hockey, and even junior B and junior A tier 2, where you have at the OHL and above, you've got coaching communities. You know what I mean? Like, there's coaching conferences that, the NHL coaching conference, like, a lot of people go to that and they talk and they have roundtables and they share. You know what I mean? Now, some coaches like to share more than others, which is unfortunate or fortunate. Some coaches like to keep their stuff a little bit more hidden, but at the end of the day, there's no secret sauce. And the more we share, I think the better we get. And I find when you look at minor hockey, and even like you're saying with the junior B, there's not as much of that community, where I think that's where it needs to be, because those kids aren't as good as the kids that are in the OHL or above. You know what I mean? And they need more help getting better, and they need better coaches. So, it's almost flipped upside down. You know what I mean? And I understand why, because it's way more competitive, and there's, way more competition going on in the OHL and the NHL for a lot of different reasons, whether it's financial, business wise, hockey wise, draft, all that stuff. But yeah, it's unfortunate sometimes that there's not more resources or more community coaching communities like that in minor hockey and junior hockey and stuff?
I find with minor hockey, especially going through with my own kids. So my two girls play girls hockey,
Yeah.
and then my little guy's playing AAA hockey. And you talk to coaches, and I think everybody's, they're great people. I think sometimes they're competing though for that respect from the parents. They're competing with respect from their coaches. They want to look in their mind better to the public, right? And they're competing with. They're not sure who they're competing with,
Yeah.
but they think they're competing,
Yeah.
right? I know just with different scenarios, I've talked to coaches because of my kids, and they're like, "Well, geez, I wasn't so sure what you were going to be like me,
Yeah.
because of my experiences." And I'm like, "Well, look, I just want to help you. I feel very blessed that I was given the opportunity I was given to coach and work with the people I work with. If you want help, I'll do my best to help you. I'll give you whatever I've got. If you don't want help, that's fine. Run it your way, right? Like, if you want suggestions, I'll give you suggestions." As I say, when we played, we had people helping and coaching us that didn't have OHL experience as coaches, right? They
Sure.
didn't play in the OHL, but we learned lots. We learned lots of accountability, hard work, all the right things. So whether Jason Brooks was there to help them or not, it didn't matter. But I want them to feel like what they're going to do with them is the right thing, right, to do it and to push themselves to do it.
Yeah. Now, being a hockey coach / dad, and I'm going to say an elite hockey coach, because there's not a lot of Jason Brooks wheeling around in minor hockey as far as, coach for as long as you did, and then still coaching this day. Do you find that, and you kind of answered a little bit, but do you find that, like, have you, over the years with your daughters and your son, have you had some kind of pushback from coaches, or coaches kind of maybe being somewhat intimidated by you and don't want to talk to you, don't really want to use you as a resource at all? Because it must be frustrating as a hockey player, coach, and a father to see some of these practices and some of these things that are going on. And you're like, man, these aren't hard fixes if you just listen a little bit, but is it tough to kind of do that as being, who you are in the hockey community?
It's funny. I've never really had any pushback. I did have one coach who, the coach now and I are very good friends. He coached my son last year, and wonderful, wonderful kid. But he did come out and say I was intimidated. I was intimidated at the fact that, your son, this is your son, and looking at your coaching record, and are you going to be criticizing everything I do or analyzing everything I do? And I just said, no. Like I said, yeah, I'm here to help. But I've had minor hockey coaches, in Listowel. I don't want to say they cut my kid because of the fact that they would have to deal with me in their mind. But they just didn't want that. Didn't want to put themselves in that position, I guess. Yeah. And that's fair. That is what it is. I mean, I was hoping they'd take my kid because my kid was good enough and not cut my kid because of their dad. But, it's a reality, right? Some people feel threatened, right? They feel threatened, and you wish they didn't, but that's just reality.
And sometimes I think it's not taking the time to get to know you either, right? Or asking you the questions too. They just think, oh, he's going to be judging me the whole time. Well, no, I don't really care. As long as my kid's having fun and he's learning a little bit, I'm on side. You know what I mean? If you want help, I could definitely help. But if not, no problem. Now, how was the conversation when your child did get cut, and maybe as a coach and maybe being a bit unbiased, like, you probably could have made that team. She probably could have made that team, but getting cut and then knowing maybe part of it is because of who you are. Like, what's that conversation like? Like, hey, you got to suck it up. You got to get better. If you want to make that team, you just got to keep practicing. Or, how deep do you get into the weeds on the kind of the bullshit?
It was a twofold conversation with my daughter. It was, this is something to learn from.
Yeah.
This is adversity you have to deal with. I mean, it sucks, but if you want to never get cut again, you got to put that extra time in. So you got to go shoot pucks, you got to go practice your stick handling, you got to watch hockey like we talked about earlier. You got to do all these little things if you want to not have that happen again. Give yourself every opportunity. If you still get cut, you get cut, but you put in your best effort, right? As a father, I handled it awful. I was one of my worst experiences.
Really?
yeah, like I went up and down, the coach. I just said, like, that's such, because I knew the kids, and I felt in my heart of hearts, and looking at it, tried not to look at it through rose-colored glasses. I tried to look at it as a coach. I'm like, she should have been there, right? Kind of even said to him, let's play. I'll coach the local league team, and we'll play you, right? Like, I'll challenge you.
I love it. Yeah.
So if you're listening, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that, but it was just the competitor in me, and trying to be a protective dad of my kid. But looking at it now, it was one of the best things for her. She's a very driven young girl, and passionate about the game, and she took it real hard. She dedicated herself never to get cut again, and she puts that time in. Like, I wish I had her desire when I played. Like, I really do. Like, she's phenomenal for her work ethic. So
it's awesome, man. No, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's the one thing I noticed going through this. And my kid is like IP, like he's going to be first year competitive like next year if he ends up deciding to play competitive or trying out or whatever. But so it's been pretty easy so far, but I still have these moments in my head where, I'm watching a practice, it's terrible. And I'm like, oh man, or something, you know what I mean? You've had him, and I'm just like, oh man, like, and I really try to, like, or he's playing a game, or my daughter's playing a game, and they just, like, they could have had that puck and they didn't go for it, or they're just not going as hard as I think they should. And it's so hard. Like, I want them to enjoy the game right now. They're young. I don't care about winning, losing. I don't care about hockey games. I want them to get better. But I find myself kind of like probably, and I've had a couple moments myself, and I've said these on the podcast before, but any crazy moments I've had, I've shared, because I want to talk about it, because people have them, but no one talks about it. But my line is, every parent's crazy. We all love our kids. We want our kids to do well. It's who hides it the best that's the least amount crazy, because we all want our kids to be good, man. We all want our kids to be able to kick a soccer ball well, or knock a ball out of the park. Like, that's what we want. But it's so hard sometimes, man, as a parent, to just bite your tongue and be like, good job, buddy. Yeah, we'll get him next time. Like, and yeah, there's some tough conversations. I think for you, with your daughters getting a little bit older now too, and even your son playing more competitive, those conversations change a little bit, right? Well, you tell me you want to be a AAA player, I'm going to have to treat you a little bit more like a AAA player, and those demands are a little bit different than playing house league, right? So
I'm laughing because my wife and I think, like, during COVID, it was awful, because we were like, AAA and high-end girls hockey, it costs a lot of money. Like, if you're not going to show us you want to get better, like, you're not going to play.
Totally.
We're, like, basically threatening them, but you're bang on the money. Like, the conversations change, the car rides home change. Like, I have a hard time because I end up coaching all of them, right? So I'm a coach or assistant coach on all their teams, because again, coaches have asked me to help, or I'm coaching them. Basically, I had to stop giving analysis. Because, like, the coach in me comes out, and it's just awful.
Yeah.
Like I told you, video, what am I, 10 negative to 1 positive? I can't find a positive in my kids' games, even though they played great games, right? They played really well, but I'm going to pick apart all the negatives.
Yeah.
So finally, with my oldest, she would get in the car and she'd say, so how was that? And I would have to change my tune and say, well, what do you think? Instead of me saying really what I want to say.
Yeah.
What do you think? You analyze it, right? And so then she would tell me, and she would start being really hard on herself, which then I would be able to go back and say, well, look, yeah, you could have done better in those plays, but what about all these other great plays you made? What about the simple, good decisions you made? Right? What about your great stick on puck as a defenseman? And right, like, it helped me put it in perspective, because I can be really hard. Like, and when I'm coaching, I'm guilty. Junior Jason comes out a lot. A lot with Bantam, Adam, Peavy, don't matter. Like, I'm hard on them, because I have an expectation of my kids, as you do.
Yep.
I have an expectation of all my kids. And I tell all the kids that I coach, look, I love you as like my own kids. Which probably scares the crap out of them, because they see how hard I am on my own kids. Right?
Yeah, right.
But as their coach, I want to make them the best I can make them. That's my goal as a coach. I might not make you perfect. I might not make you NHLers or NCAA Division I girls hockey players or Olympians. But I'm going to make you the best I can make you, if you're willing to put the time in. But if you're not going to work at it, you're going to, see Junior Jason.
Yeah.
Totally. And he rears his ugly head at times. I got to watch because, again, there are kids, right? But I'm passionate about it. I want them to be the best they can be and push themselves to the levels I know they're capable of.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, man. And it's funny you say that because I started doing the same thing. I started asking my kids, hey, how'd you play? Or hey, who'd you think was a really good player on the other team? And kind of see how they saw things, And for the most part, you're right, because they'll say something like, "Oh, I missed a shot" or whatever. And my kids are young, so. But I'm like, you know what? But you had a couple other good. So kind of, allows me to add the positives if they're a little bit negative. But then there are times when they come in, like, hey, how do you think how'd the game go, or whatever, and how do you think you played? And he'll tell me, or she'll tell me, like, I think I played really good, and they didn't, and I'm just like, so now, like, do I get into this, or do I, So most of the time I just let it go. I'm like, okay, and in their mind, they thought they played okay. So I'm like, they're sick. They're young, so it doesn't matter. But I'm like, okay. But now, to your point, when my kids are 10, 11, and they're trying out A or double A or whatever they want to do, that conversation is going to have to be a little bit different. Because if you want to play A, double A, or triple A, you want to be on the best team or whatever you want to do, then the expectations from mom and dad paying for it, taking the time out of their day, and all that stuff that we go through as parents and our parents went through, there's got to be work ethic there. There's got to be those. And to me, those are... I'm sure you're the same on this. Is those for me are really important in hockey, obviously, or sports. But to me, those are life. You know what I mean? And like, even you told your story here today, and like, you didn't get through all this stuff and start coaching at a high level because you were just kind of bobbing and weaving through the lines. Like, you were working, man. To coach in the OHL, like, you're at the rink at 6, 7, 8, 9 in the morning, and you're there till 3, 4, 5. You watch more video than. I mean, your eyes are probably bugging out half the time because you're on the computer. Like, it's crazy, right? And people don't see that, but it's hard work to be a coach at a high level, man. And so you want that same work ethic from your kids if they want to play at a high level. So I think it's important for sure.
I think the best part of what you just said, though, it's the life skill.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the hockey. I want you to work your hardest in school. I want you. I've been pushing my guys, and when I say my guys, my kids, but also the kids I coach. I want to see them be the best people they can be. I want to see them be the best students they can be. So if you're a C student, I want you to strive for those Bs, right? I want you to give your very best at those Bs. And then the old mirror test, right? Can you look in the mirror and say, yeah, I did it?
Yeah.
If you're a B student, fight for those A's. And if you're an A student, well, shoot for perfection. What the heck?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But drive that. And we're doing that right from Adam all the way to the junior B group. Like, try to be the best you can be, because if this doesn't work out for you like you hope, you set yourself up though for everything else in life.
Totally.
Right? Having that drive and that work ethic and that commitment. And, that's again through a lot of failures on my part, right? Like going through the failures and experiences and learning from it and trying to grow and share that experience with them to be positive.
Oh, definitely. Now, talking a little bit here about mindset, and obviously, anybody who's listening to this can tell what type of a person and a coach that you would be. Obviously, you had obviously another kind of battle to go through here, kind of in the last couple of years, with finding a tumor, and how did that transpire, and what was your mindset going into that? I know you've had other obstacles come in with even just injuries, like you break an ankle. I mean, guys came up to you as a teammate and be like, "Oh man, sorry, buddy. Oh, it sucks." But until anyone else has broken an ankle or broken a bone, you don't get what it's like. And it sucks, man. You're laid up, you know what I mean? So it's hard. And you battled through that. You battled through, obviously, your concussions, all that stuff. What was the mentality going into this kind of the most recent battle for you, and kind of how that all transpired?
So I just finished in Niagara. I left Niagara due to actually another injury, of course, but I had back surgery. Back in Guelph, I had spinal surgery. I had spinal fusion. I had herniated 3 discs, had surgery. So when I went to Niagara, my back started acting up again. So I had a minor surgery done. And at that time, I'd been talking to my dad about getting out of the game and coming home, and just because of the injuries. So I started working for him in 2013, and my head was really bothering me. And I'd be looking at the computer screen and it'd go, blinding light. So I just started having weird symptoms and headaches that were different from concussion headaches, right? Because I hadn't had the concussion forever in the day now. So, anyway, long story short, I went and saw a doctor about my hearing, because my hearing had been seemingly going as well. went and saw this doctor. He ends up saying, go get a MRI done. Go have an MRI. Shows you got a brain tumor, right? So immediately my mind's in the gutter, right? Because I don't know what to expect. I get good news from the perspective of it was a benign tumor.
Yeah.
But, for me, it was still a tumor. It was still a brain tumor. It was still something that was going to require surgery. Again, go into a dark place, right?
Yeah.
Have the surgery done in 13. Had facial paralysis on my left side. So it took a long time. Look, it's a long time to recover. And when I say recover, I'm still recovering, but I mean, it's much better. I can talk and
totally, yeah.
Not as slurry as I was. But anyway, it was tough. And then, so coaching the year we won the Cherry Cup the first year, I was starting to get the headaches bad again, and had an MRI done, and the tumor had started to go back again. So this time we're going to do radiation. So I went through the radiation during the season and the playoffs. Had the radiation done, and then probably a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe now, I had gamma knife surgery, which is just an intense radiation to it. Okay. To try to shrink it a little bit. So far so good. I've had success with it, but that's the journey of the my head, the tumor, and persevering from it. I guess I didn't stop doing anything with it. I coached with it. I tried not to miss any practices and or games. I just kept trucking along and tried to work, but again, it was a very dark time for me. I was not going and not handling it real well.
Well, and I can't imagine, especially with the pressure of just even being a father, you know what I mean? Being, and all that stuff, I can't imagine what that would be like with just having to go through that stuff. Now, going through the concussions and then going through this whole period with the tumor, were you more open with it? Were you communicating more and things like that than what you did back then? Or did you because I think as males in general, we tend to internalize. If I'm going through a tough time at work and I'm stressed out about it, I don't come home and be like, hey, guess what? I want to talk to you about this, honey. Like, I'll bottle it up for a couple of days and then I'll be grumpy and whatever. And then it'll come out eventually, usually. But so I think as males, I think it's a bad trait we probably have. But were you more like, did you approach it differently than what you did then? Or was it two totally different beasts for you?
It was different, but I probably handled it the same way. I handled it really, really poorly.
Yeah.
Like just very, very internally, very selfishly, very much an individual. And because of it, again, it's another chapter that I just turned the page now and kind of have learned from and moved on. Now I can tell you I communicate all the time. Now I can tell you I have opened up with my wife and we talk all the time about stuff. I mean, I don't want to let things linger inside me to do what it was doing to me. So, it's definitely an experience. I don't wish upon anybody, but at the same time, you learn the support you get from people. I mean, at the time, people were wonderful with their support. They supported just like my wife and my kids and helping us. And that was phenomenal.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, it's good. And it's one thing I learned, and same thing, like every bad experience that you've had, I'm sure you look back and you're like, I learned so much from that, and I remember this is years ago now, but I was away at college and my dad got sick and he, it was the week after he dropped me off at college. So he dropped me off the next weekend, he got sick and he had something called encephalitis. So basically messed with his brain and ended up losing all his kind of bunch of his memory. And he was a totally different man after that. But beside the point, I went a whole year. So I stayed in college. I was going to leave. I was going to come home. My mom and dad had small businesses and I was going to quit school and come home. And my mom was a rock. She's like, no, there's no way you're not leaving. You're staying there. You're not coming home. You can't do anything at home. So I have a younger brother and sister. So I was kind of being that older brother or whatever. But thank God she kept me there. But what I'm getting at is from that point on all the way till the next year, I didn't talk about it hardly at all. Like none of the guys at school knew about it. I was just battling with it and same with you, not doing well with it. Like, this was hard, right? So the next year I told my buddy found out about it. I told him, one of my best buddies on my team, and we were talking about it, and he was so pissed off at me. Like he was irate, and it was all good, but he's like, why didn't you tell me about this? And from that point on, when I started talking about it, it was so much better. It was almost easier for me to deal with. I wasn't going around publicly telling everybody, but it was like my buddies and girlfriends at the time or whatever. I would be more open about how I felt about this situation, or this makes me sad or whatever. Like, and it was night and day. And to that point on, I was way more about just communicating. And again, I'm not great at it, but I really try to like be as open as I can. And I find, for me anyway, personally, as a guy, that was one of the best things I ever did. And it took me a year of just kind of bottling it up inside, not really talking about it with anybody, to starting. And I was like, wow, what a game changer, man. So to your point, like you said, now, like the way you communicate now, I'm sure it's a little bit different, but for me, it was a night and day change from just how I felt and how I could deal with stuff.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not perfect either on the communicating. I mean, I like to try to open up more, but yeah, it's definitely still an area I got to do a better job of, for sure.
Well, now that we've taken this right into the dumps here, I reached out to a couple of guys, and just because I know there's a lot of guys from the area that I've been on the ice with, that I know in the area that have played for you, and I know what type of coach you are from a lot, like Joe Birch and other guys that I know that always talk very, very highly of you. But so I got a little bit of dirt on you, but I ended up texting with Brandon Buck, and he was like, oh man, because I said, hey, I might have Brooksy on in the next little bit, and he's like, it was awesome. He's like, he was the one guy that probably outside of the norm that really took a liking to me and really gave me the confidence to become the player that I am. And it was those are the types of words you said this earlier, like when you meet these kids after they're done playing, and that's one of the rewarding things probably for a coach, right? You see a guy, maybe he's got selling insurance, working at Tim Hortons, like, hey, Coach Brooks, how you doing? Man, I'm doing well. I got a kid. And like, to me, even now I'm starting to meet kids that I've worked with here, and it's awesome. They're going to law school or they're doing this. I'm like, oh my God, good for you. Not even playing hockey anymore. But Buck, said unbelievable things. And the other one was Mercer, who I know played with you just recently, and with Cullen Mercer, an awesome guy, great, good family, and just a hardworking kid who's probably going to do way better things than he ever did with hockey, just with his mind and the type of kid he is and the type of person he is, right? But had nothing but like he's over the moon on what type of guy you were and how you pushed and how you made them better and how you kept them accountable and stuff. So I wanted to share that with you, because a lot of times you don't get a chance to hear that stuff, but obviously a lot of young men and women, I'm sure, because you're coaching girls too, that have been affected by it in a very positive way. I'm sure some don't like you because you're too hard on them, but overall, the ones that you want to like you for sure. So,
well, even the ones that don't like me, I just hope that they realized I had their best interests. I wanted them to be, as I say, I wanted to push them to be their best, and help them get as far in the game as I possibly could get them. Whether that was a junior going pro, whether that was an Adam going to Pee Wee, AAA, like a kid in Listowel playing Adam, Listowel rep to AAA. Like, I wanted to help them, and I really do feel fortunate. Again, as I've said this before, about the experience and the journey I've had in the game, and the knowledge I've been able to get through the game, through wonderful people who gave me the time. And I wanted to give back to them and those kids and give them everything I got, and try to help them, again, experience the highest level they possibly could.
No, I love it, man. No, I think it's great. And I really appreciate your time. I'm going to pick your brain on one more thing before we get going here, but you've got a young boy right now and two young girls that are playing and stuff like that. What kind of message would you send to any parent out there that's asking or inquiring about, and I guess selfishly I'll say this is me asking you, but no, like what kind of things should parents look at doing with their kids if their kid, because obviously, let's be honest, a lot of these kids love hockey. They do love it. They want to be on the ice. They want to skate. They want to do all that stuff. But as a dad who's gone through it and a coach, what are some of those most important things that you feel parents should focus on at young ages? So starting at, let's say, 8, 9 and moving up a little bit, but is there anything that could be skill, could be attitude, could be appreciation, could be whatever, but as I'm sure you've probably got a handful of ideas on this just because you've gone through it for a while, but yeah, what kind of advice would you give those parents?
So I'm going to start with the skills first, the skill development first. I'm going to say, you mentioned skating. Skating's a priority. So, if you want to do extra in power skating, I think would be value added, right? Like if you can skate, that's going to give you a leg above a lot of things. Handling pucks, obviously, with skills coaches like yourself, where you're teaching proper fundamentals and head up and what to do and what not to do. From that perspective, right? I think the point you just made, though, for these kids is don't focus so much on the score. Don't focus so much on how many goals little Johnny scored or how many goals little Susie scores, right? Like totally. that doesn't mean they played a good game because they scored a goal. Your team loses 10-3, but you got 2 goals. Yeah, that's great. You had a good game. You scored 2 goals, but you really didn't because you didn't make your teammates better.
Yeah.
Try to, if you're that parent, challenge your son or daughter to make your teammates around you better. Challenge them to make them better. So how do you do that? Is it by being the fastest skater and pushing everybody to keep up to you and challenging them, or passing, maybe making an extra pass or 2 in practice just because, right? Like, yeah, you had a great scoring opportunity, but I'm going to make that extra pass to my teammate because I want to get them involved. I think there's so much to being a teammate, right?
Agree, yeah.
That we lose sometimes as parents, right? Because it's easy to quantify goals. It's easy to quantify points and assists. But the game itself, are you doing the little things as a teammate, right? The hockey sense talk, we had it already, but did you get your head up to make that pass to the open guy? Or did you try to dangle because it looked cooler, right? Teach them young now to do those right things, I think is the most important thing.
I love it. No, and I think the one thing that I want to push on here and emphasize a little more is that being a teammate. I think shin pad tapping a guy when he gets a good pass or a good shot, or going up to your goalie and giving her a tap on the pads when she makes a big save, and saying thank you to your coach when you leave practice or leave a game, like saying thank you to your parents for driving you to the rink. Like those are all things that young kids need to learn. Those are just, to me, life skills that are just appreciation, things like that. I think it's huge, but that all comes to exactly what you're saying as far as just being a good teammate, just being someone that people want to be around. And let's be honest, man, you played a lot of hockey, you've coached a lot of hockey. You've got guys on your team, guys you've coached, guys you played with that didn't have the skill, couldn't skate well enough to play potentially at that level, but were on that team because they were an unbelievable guy and they worked hard, or an unbelievable girl because they worked hard and they were, so they were a good teammate. The guys wanted to be around them, and so there's a lot of place for people like that in life, not just hockey, if just being a good teammate,
Absolutely. I think that's a great point.
Well, buddy, listen, man, I really appreciate you coming on. This is awesome. And again, I always say this, but like I've learned something off this. The selfish, I only do the podcast so I can steal stuff off people and use it with my kids and my wife, and my family. So, but no, this is great, man. I really appreciate you coming on, and I really appreciate you opening up a little bit about your stories and stuff, because I think, I said this to other guys too. Like the more we talk about it, someone else is going through this. 100%, and it could be something a little bit different, but other people are going through the same stuff that you've gone through, I've gone through, and I think the more we share and talk about it, and it's not easy to talk about sometimes, but it definitely can be helpful for people out there. So I really appreciate you coming on and being open and honest with it. It was awesome.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a blast talking hockey and talking about what we talked about.
Yeah, it's always good to talk some shop for sure. Well, listen, best of luck with, obviously, hopefully everything gets back going here in the new year, but and enjoy the holidays with the family for sure.
You as well.
Well.
Thank you again. Okay.
To kind of raise that bar.
That extra gear, the first 3 steps.
Huge strides in the performance.
That I might not be the player I am today.